go. Hello and welcome to Matchday Musings. I'm joined by a very special guest, Rob Ellis.
How you doing, Damien? Nice to see you,
I'm
mate.
good, thank you. First of all, thank you for coming on the show.
Pleasure. Looking forward to it.
So just to start off, to give my viewers an idea of you as a person, can we go back to sort of your earliest football memories and who you supported as a kid, stuff like that?
Yeah. I'm an Arsenal fan. I don't know. I was laughing there. I should be happy at the moment. I mean, maybe that's why I'm laughing. It's a good time finally. But no, I grew up in North London, so in Kentish Town. Kentish Town's probably about 20 minutes from where we used to play at Highbury. My whole family are Arsenal fans. My mum, massive Arsenal fan. My brother, all my friends. It's very much an Arsenal area. And my first memories were like most kids. You know, I started going with my brother to Highbury when I was about 7 or 8, and it was just magical. You know, that first time you walk into the stadium and you hear the noise, and it's like, what was? It's just like, you know, it was entering this other world. And you know, it was always in my blood, Arsenal. But once I started going to Highbury, you know, every week I'd go into the junior gunners enclosure with my older brother and my best friend Sam. And you know, it was just such a great time. I was so lucky. Pretty much the first full season I started going to watch Arsenal, we won the league for the first time in 18 years. We won the league in 1989. This was before the Premier League, when George Graham was our manager. And he had built a really young, exciting team, much like Arteta's doing now. He built a great team, and I used to go and watch. I had so many heroes, and I was so lucky in my first year. You know, my team won the league, and so, you know, once you have such a strong memory like that, such a powerful, positive early memory. There was only ever one team for me, and you know, so they were my first real football memories. My first, always going to watch Arsenal at Highbury.
So just sort of expanding on that briefly, who was like one of your childhood heroes that really stood out to you, something like that?
Well, I don't know how old your listeners are. I mean, I'm 44, so you know, I'm in midlife. So my earliest football heroes were late 80s, and you know, it kind of changed every week. I'm sure, you know, when you're a Brighton fan, when you're a kid, you go through phases, don't you? In the playground, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to be him today. So it kind of changed. But I players that really stuck out for me, I really liked our centre forward, Alan Smith. He does a lot of work on Sky now. He was a really great number 9. Paul Merson used to play just off Alan Smith, and he was a really exciting young player. David Rocastle, who sadly died. He played in midfield with Michael Thomas. It was just every week you'd find someone that you really sort of had, you know, a massive period of being so interested in them. So yeah, and then you know, as the team progressed, probably my 2 favourite players of all time at Arsenal are Tony Adams, you know, Mr. Arsenal, and also Ray Parlour. I just loved how much he loved the club and how hard he worked. But Ray Parlour came a bit later. But Tony Adams was always there as a kid, Mr. Reliable every week. So they're my 2 favourites, I would say.
So obviously from being a fan, you gradually got more involved in football. So
Correct,
what was your sort of first involvement in football career-wise?
In terms of career-wise, I was probably about 19 or 20. I had done what used to be called the JTM, the Junior Team Managers Qualification, which then became an FA Level 1. I did that when I was quite young, when I was at university. And my first involvement was working for the Middlesex FA. So I knew they were looking for coaches, community coaches. And while I was a university student, I just sent my CV off to them looking for summer holiday work. And so for a year or so, I used to work for the Middlesex FA, just, you know, on community projects. So I was quite lucky that I got involved in football coaching quite young. I mean, but I couldn't really take it on too long because I was playing for most of my adult life. So the coaching kind of started early, but had to go on the back burner for 10, 12 years while I played. And then I kind of got back into it in my 30s more.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, just first of all, about your playing time. Can you first of all explain to my viewers what position you were and things like that?
Yeah, well, I played in centre midfield. If I stood up, which I'm not going to, I'm quite tall. I'm about 6'2", and there was always this thing. It might still go on now, perhaps less. If you're tall, you either got put a centre back or centre forward. Now I can't score goals and I can't header, so both of those positions didn't really suit me. And I always wanted to play in centre midfield, and I was quite stubborn about it. I wanted to play in there, and I thought it was my best position. So I played centre midfield. I played to a reasonable level. I played junior football. I played for quite a strong team in London. There was a guy who set up a youth team, and he was very lucky. The area of London we were in was very strong for football. And a number of the boys that I played with went on to play professionally. So the team I played for as a boy, one of the guys went on to play for West Ham and Nottingham Forest, Marlon Harewood. So Marlon had a really long career, very, very good player. Marlon played in the same team as me as a junior. And there's another guy called Saji Burton, who played for Crystal Palace, Hayden Fleming, who played for Cardiff. And so we had a really, really strong team. And I played for them all the way up until I was about 16, 17. And then I kind of went into professional and non-league football. I got a 6-month YTS at Peterborough United. But I got that in the second year. I was a second year YTS 6-month trial, but I didn't get signed. I then went on to Cambridge United, where I had another trial, didn't get signed. And obviously by this stage, I'm starting to get a bit of a message here, which is probably not good enough. Yeah. So then I played non-league football for about 10 years in London. So it was just below the conference. It was called the Ryman Premier Division.
Yeah.
I played for Enfield, Harrow Borough, Hendon. So they're all sort of North London clubs. So that was my, I was about to say illustrious playing career. It really wasn't illustrious. It was not great.
I mean, playing in non-league for that amount of time, you must have come up against some very good young talent as well. Yeah. Do you remember one player that you played against that made you think, wow, this kid's good?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it was funny, Damien. It's kind of, it was non-league, but basically when I was at Peterborough, sometimes they had a non-league club attached to them. There was a non-league club called Bashley, who were in Hampshire, near the New Forest. Now, Peterborough had a link with Bashley, and I was kind of playing some games because I was on trial. They wanted to see me play lots of games. So I was kind of farmed out to play for Bashley. Now, at the time, I was playing in a non-league setting. I was in the same team as Simon Davis. Now, Simon went on to play for Wales, Tottenham, and Matthew Etherington. So Matthew also played for Tottenham, West Ham, Stoke. And I remember vividly those two. I remember they were all very good players, but I remember playing with them and thinking, this is a level above. It was just, they didn't make mistakes. That was the thing that really stood out to me. There were no mistakes. It was everything done well every time. And it really made me think what a good player is. It's doing it well all the time. You know, I was inconsistent. Sometimes I'd do something nice, but then it would go wrong. Those two really, really stood out. That was playing with. In terms of playing against, I couldn't tell you, who went on to do what necessarily. But yeah, there were lots of good players, lots and lots of good players.
Obviously, you said that helps you realize what a good player is. Yeah. So as you said, it was about consistency and all that. Is that one of the things that inspired you to then go on to more coaching once you stopped playing, because you wanted to help the next generation become consistent?
Yeah, I think so, Damien. I mean, I think one of the things about, as a coach, one of the reasons it's such a tiring job is because I mean, I didn't play at a particularly high level in the grand scheme of things, but I played at a level which is probably comparable, and the gap has closed. If you're looking now at the conference and the division below the conference, there's not a great deal between that and League Two, in my opinion. League Two will come out winners more often than not. But having played at a reasonable level, it did make me think about, as I say, what you need to be a good player. Because I used to play sometimes and find my level. There were some people I used to play against and think, Rob, you're not that good. And you go away from it and think, what was it about them that was so good? And it was, as I say, it was that consistency. And so when you're a coach, I think one of the things I always drum into the players is the fine detail. Everything you do, even if it's a simple receiving the ball and passing, if you're sloppy with the first touch, it's going to be a bad pass. If the touch is not spot on against good players, you will lose the ball. And you might have a nice touch once, you might have a nice touch twice, but the third time, if your touch lets you down on the edge of your penalty area and someone scores, that's the touch everyone's going to remember. And so when you're in training and players are thinking, oh God, he's going on and on again, it's because in a match, if it goes wrong, people will remember players' mistakes, unfortunately. So I am quite fussy on that consistency. It's no good I can do it. We can, most people at a reasonable level can do something. You score a nice free kick. How many out of 10 are you scoring? You might hit one. It looks great. But what about the next one, the one after? So it's still that about consistency, I think.
Exactly. So obviously, as you retired and moved more into coaching, what was your first sort of main coaching involvement?
The first one, I mean, as I say, when I was playing, I had kind of kept an involvement in coaching. I had done some work for various clubs at their development centres. They used to be called satellite centres. They're now called player development centres. It's the same thing. It's boys and girls who are not quite yet at academy level. It's kind of like you watch and you monitor them. And so I'd done some work for Watford. I'd also done some work for Northampton Town. They had satellite centres in London. And I was coaching some of their players in my early 20s. I wasn't much older than some of them. So I had always kept the coaching going. But then I moved into, when I was a player, I also became a PE teacher. And any PE teacher will know how demanding the job is. I didn't have time to coach as well. But as time progressed, I got a little bit bored of PE teaching and I realized I wanted to coach more. And I just sent my CV off. I had done a sports science degree. I'd played a reasonable level. I sent my CV off to all the London clubs. And I said, I've played at this level. By that time, I had an FA level 2. And I couldn't believe it. The next day, I got a phone call from Chelsea's foundation. And they said, oh, can you come and do a little practice session? Can you put on a practice session? So I went and did a session. And I started working for Chelsea. And progressively, I moved further on until I was one of the lead coaches or the head coach at one of their development centres in London. And so I did that for a number of years. So mainly I was working at Chelsea's development centre. So as I say, they're the players who are not at academy level, but have been identified as talented players. And I did that for many years. I mean, less and less now because I've moved into other things. But I was working for Chelsea's foundation for about 7 years and had some really nice memories of coaching abroad and working with some really talented young players. So that was a big part of my coaching life, Chelsea's foundation and all the projects around there.
So you said you had some lovely memories of like coaching abroad and whatnot. Can you give us some stories and stuff on things like that?
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea, I mean, all football clubs, their community project. The bigger clubs will obviously do more overseas work. And obviously, because Chelsea is such a massive club, they have development centres in different countries. They have global projects. So I was lucky enough to travel to different countries, to America, to Turkey, where you were essentially working with, talented players who were being, trained by the club, a long way from the academy. But it was, really nice traveling around with coaches, going to different places in those countries, working with some good players. And I think travel is really one of the best things about coaching. I was also lucky enough when I was playing to travel as well. There was a period just before I dropped out of professional football, YTS level. I got taken on trial by a French club. They were in sort of second or third division, and I was an 18-year-old boy. I got spotted playing in London, bizarrely enough, by a club in France. And I went out there on trial for 2 weeks. It was probably the happiest 2 weeks I've had as a player. The style really suited me. It was a little bit slower. The sun was shining. I did so well. And the manager said, "We want to sign you." And I was like, "This is brilliant. This couldn't be better." So I told my mum, and I said, "I'm going to go and live in France." By the time I got back to England, he'd been sacked. So, so my dreams of going out to play for the team disintegrated when the manager was sacked. But I think for any player or coach, traveling with football is the best thing. It's the thing you'll remember most.
So apart from Chelsea, what other sort of coaching roles have you done that you'd like to touch on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've worked at so many grassroots clubs. A lot of it has been school-related coaching. The school I used to work at in London was it used to be a boys school, Christ's College School in Finchley, and it became a real hotbed for football talent. Me and the head of PE, a guy called Daniel, he was the manager at the time of a club called Wingate and Finchley. They're in the Ryman Premier Division. Now, me and Daniel worked very closely, and we set up this massive program within the school, like a centre of excellence, where we were training boys in our school every night, year 7s, year 8s, year 9s, lunchtime clubs, fixtures every day. We got to a point where we were such a strong team. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, that how we took a real professional coaching element into a school. And it really showed, even at school level, with all the problems in the school, the players we had, we produced so many good players. So that took up a lot of my time. And then with Daniel, I also went on to work at Wingate and Finchley. So they're in the Ryman Premier. So he took me to Wingate and Finchley as a first team coach there. So I was there for a season, and that was really enjoyable. It really opened my eyes up again to non-league football. I'd stopped playing it, and then coaching it, it brought back all the memories of it. So, I mean, as I say, there's been an involvement in non-league football. There's been the involvement with the professional clubs, loads and loads of school-related stuff. So I've lost track of all the junior clubs I've coached for, and so on and so on. But yeah, lots of memories, lots of nice memories as well.
You mentioned something about the international talent centres when we spoke as well. I wondered if you could touch on those a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the last couple of years, Damien, I've been as I've done less and less stuff at Chelsea, I've got more and more involved in working with individual players. Lots of one-to-one coaching, small group coaching. So I work for a coaching agency where players are matched with coaches geographically. So I live in West London. So let's say there was a non-league player who wanted to do a little bit extra. He would be matched to me. We would discuss what we want to do, and then I would work with him for a period of time, maybe psychological, maybe technical, maybe physical. And that's become really busy. I've got a lot of people to coach, and it's taken up a lot of time. But this opportunity I had with the coaching agency, we got approached by a Japanese guy. And where I live in West London, there's a huge Japanese community. He asked me to train a couple of players, and I said, that's fine. As time progressed, he explained to me that he was in charge of something called the International Sports Academy, which basically is a project where he sends players from Japan. Some of them play professionally, some of them play university level, some of them play that. They want to come to England. When they come to England, they want to play at a higher level as possible. So what I do is, when the players come over, I help them find a suitable club, whether it's non-league football, amateur football, and I also work with the players individually. So to try and get them to a level where they're competitive, perhaps in non-league football, and I coach them as groups as well. So they're all Japanese players. They come over for varying periods of time, could be 6 months, could be 2 years, and they're all playing at different levels. And it's really, really interesting trying to explain the football culture, the cultural differences between Japanese and English. And it's been one of the most enjoyable things I've done. Hopefully, I'd like perhaps to be able to go out to Japan and see the other side of it, because it's based in Tokyo, but the guy who runs it here, he's kind of like the middleman between the players, and really, really fascinating. Really great players to work with, Japanese players.
Mm-hmm. So just touching on what you said there about the cultural differences in football, for my viewers that wouldn't necessarily know much about that, could you just explain a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in relation to how it's different to perhaps Japanese, or just the English football culture generally.
A little bit of both. Give the viewers some background if you could.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, having played football for so long, I kind of feel like when I was young, it was a very sort of almost like the military. You know, when you did a YTS, polish the boots, sweep the stands, clean the floors, clean the toilets, go out, train very hard, rain or shine. You know, you didn't want to show weakness. If you were feeling a little bit rough and they're going out for a run in the sleet, you didn't want to show that. There was this mentality, you've got to be tough. You've got to be tough. Now, was I instinctively tough as a 16, 17-year-old? No, I wasn't. I was quite shy. I was quite nervous, but I wouldn't show it. And so it made me learn how to act tough. And it's something I've carried with me throughout my coaching career, acting tough. Whether that's good for you psychologically, I don't know. But I think in English football culture, it's changed a bit, but there is still a mentality of you've got to be strong. You've got to be physically strong. You can't show any sign of weakness. And it's quite aggressive. You know, football is competitive, and there's no getting away from the fact the higher up you go, it's aggressive. It's a competition. And I think the best players are able to handle that, you know, to handle that aggression, to handle that it is cutthroat. And I think the biggest difference is with the Japanese guys that I see. There's lots and lots of good players, lovely technique, but they have openly said to me, and this is not a sort of a lazy stereotype, they have openly said to me their biggest concern, biggest problem is the physical side of the game. They have said that when they watch English football, they find it so fast. The contact, the tackles, it's so physically overwhelming. And also what's so interesting, the Japanese culture is so much based on respect and politeness. To the extent I've taken some guys to non-league training and they will not ask for the ball. So you could be playing an 8-a-side and you know what it's like, everyone's shouting, give me the ball, ball, you know. They're in the best position, but will not ask for the ball. And I've said to them, you know, are you okay? What's going on? And it's just kind of, it's a hesitance. Some of the players don't like to be the loud one. Within the culture, I think it's much more peaceful, quiet, and it's quite a big transition with all the shouting and swearing you get in English culture, the language, the mickey taking. I think it's a real shock going into that. And it's not so much about the football. It's kind of like, I think for them, it's almost like entering a pub. You know what I mean? It's that mentality sometimes. It's
proper culture shock kind of thing.
Real culture shock, yeah. Real culture shock.
So just to sort of elaborate on that, I mean, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong here. I think that youth players now are a lot more, I'm not going to say pampered, but looked after than players in your day. Do you think that harms their development in some ways?
That's a really good question. It's a really good question, Damien, because, you know, I'm sure, you know, when you watch, you know, when you watch the Premier League, I think it's very hard for anyone to deny how high the standard is. You know, people sometimes say, oh, the Premier League's not the best. Whether it's the best, I don't know. But I can say anyone that gets to that level is incredible. To even play professional football, you know, 1 minute as a professional footballer, you are seriously talented, you're seriously determined, you're seriously physically impressive. But football has got better. You know, the Arsenal team I watched in 1989 were league champions. if that team played the Arsenal team of today, who are going through a transition period, I have no doubt that this team would win, the current team.
Mm-hmm.
But the perception's different. In recent years, Arsenal have struggled, whereas they were champions in '89. But the standard does go up because of sports science. Players are faster, players are stronger. The level of training is much more intense. There's less of a drinking culture. Players have got better. And so young players, you know, it stands to reason. The players coming through have to be exceptional to make it through to professional level. However, what you were saying about being pampered, I don't think it's harmed their development technically. Not at all. I think in some ways, the protected or pampered, I think may have helped technical advancements because there's less emphasis on tackling, heading, physical strength, more technical. Mentally, it's a good question. I think it probably has. I think it has hampered some players, some of the younger players. And this is not a sweeping generalization. I don't mean to say all the young players are all soft. It's not that at all. It's not that at all. They're not soft. But I do think there is perhaps football is less and less in the real world. So if you've gone through the football system now, I don't think it's so easy to link the club to the community, the club to real life. Professional players now are miles apart from the average person in the street. 20, 30 years ago, I don't think it was like that. There was much more access to players. There was a much more intimate relationship. And I think maybe psychologically and from that perspective, I think it has hampered the players. Technically, no, but really interesting question. And it's very easy for people to say, oh, the players are all soft now. They don't know how lucky they are. I don't think that's totally fair, but I think they're in a different world now to, you know, 20, 30 years ago. It's a different world.
I mean, on the subject of, like you say, different world, I mean, we've spoke about this sort of ourselves, but not on the program, obviously. What do you think of the impact of social media on a player, whether that be mentally or just in general?
It must be terrifying. It must be terrifying. I mean, you know, I've only started using social media in the last year. I mean, literally, when people say I don't use it, I'd never used it. I use it for Twitter, and that is for that's for marketing a book I wrote. I don't comment on anything else. I don't comment on Arsenal. I don't comment on politics. Nothing to do with that. I don't post pictures of me, you know, on holiday. None of that. But, you know, I do realize, even on Twitter, you know, you can get sucked in. You can get, you know, notifications. Oh, what's this? I'll click on this. And hours and hours and hours pass. But I grew up in a world where it didn't exist. But I still use it far too much. If you're a young player and you're 20, you know, these things will have been there all your life. And that is so much part of your life. And the comments, and it's an addiction. If you've played well, you know, they want to be online, seeing what people say about it. But the other side of it, if you've had a horrible game, some of the comments, when you're a young man or woman, must really, really hit you hard, you know, and it must be hard to pull on the shirt next game and go out in front of those people who've been saying all this stuff online and feel like you're part of that still. So I think it can be really damaging. It can be really damaging. And clubs, I think clubs are trying to protect players, but how do we protect people from social media? You know, it's a big sociological problem. I don't know.
I mean, obviously, just to expand on that and highlight the differences, I mean, I use Twitter, as you know, to promote this sort of thing and stuff like that. But obviously, after the Euros final defeat for the men, I kept looking to see what was happening to the ones that missed the penalties, because obviously you heard about they got a lot of abuse. But then you look at the other side of it, and when the women won the Euros, all the congratulatory messages, the feel-good factor. So how do you think a player could channel that in a more positive way?
Well, I mean, you know, okay, so say for example, you know, some of the abuse that Saka got after missing the penalty. Really, I mean, God, that I don't know how he must have felt hearing some of the disgusting abuse that he got. And it must be very hard. It must take a very strong character to come back and pull on his club shirt and run out in front of those people at away grounds and just perform at the level he did. But I think, you know, if you can psychologically handle the abuse, and that's not easy, I think it almost makes the player, it can make the player tougher, which is, I think, you know, it's the same in life. When you go really low, when something happens and you know you've been there, anything else that happens, you can always refer back to that and think, well, I got through that. And if you're using, you know, Saka as an example, you know, the season afterwards, which was last season for Arsenal, he was player of the season. He just won England's player of the year. I think he was Arsenal's top goal scorer, and he's become the player that he has. But I think, you know, if you can channel it and just use it as a point of reference, which is, this is how really bad feels. So anything else that comes after that probably won't be as bad, you know. So I think if players can do that, it's takes a lot of strength, but it can be helpful.
And just finally, to wrap up this point of the discussion,
yeah,
what do you think the importance is of like sports psychologists and that in football now?
Very important, very important. But I think, like anything, there might come a full circle, a turning of the wheel. I think in sport, clubs are looking for 1% advantages over the other. And so in the mid-90s, sports science came in, and then there was a focus on diet. And then I remember there was a focus on the use of creatine as like a performance enhancer. Then there was stuff about stretching. Then there was stuff about post-match recovery. Then there was ice bath, and so on and so on and so on. And then latterly, sports psychology became massive. In the last 10 or 15 years, it's a massive, massive thing. And I don't doubt that it helps players. I don't doubt at all in terms of target setting, goal setting. But I think anything after a while loses its impact. Even with managers, you can have a great manager. If he's been at a club 10 years, he'll lose his impact because people switch off from it. And I think there might come a point where people learn so much about sports psychology, and the players probably know so much about it already. It might get to a point where they educate themselves. And so the role might not become so sought after, because the players, I'm sure now, are much more psychologically enlightened than 30, 40 years ago. They probably understand how to set targets more, how to get through difficult situations. So, you know, as I say, and it's the same with styles of play. You know, when I was growing up, most teams just hit it long, route one.
Tony Pulis football.
Tony Pulis, well, you know, Pulis is, you know, I think Tony Pulis is a very good coach. I hope he's not listening to this. but yeah, there is an association, you know, with the 80s of just hit it long, hit it long. Then Barcelona, you know, the great Barcelona, it was tiki-taka. Every team wants to play that. And eventually, all teams have to find their own style. You can't play like Watford and Wimbledon played like in the mid-80s. Not every team can do that. And not every team's going to play like Barcelona. Not every team can play like Man City. Every team has to find their own style.
And the thing is, it's like, I'm just going to touch on this with you because I'd like a coach's sort of point of view on this. I was talking to a friend about this the other day. I said that every style of play will eventually get figured out, like Spanish tiki-taka did. And he said, but it was the greatest style of football we've ever seen. I said, but eventually that gets figured out.
Correct, yeah. No, you're right, Damien. I mean, it's like, I think the problem is that the best teams and the best coaches set the trend. And if it works, everyone else will follow. But eventually, if everyone follows the same trend, everyone's playing the same style of football. So if everyone in the Premier League is talking about playing out from the back and dominating possession, the other side of that coin is the coaches know exactly how to defend that. They know exactly what the other coach is doing. And so football can get a little bit boring without a predictability. But as you say, tiki-taka, you know, has been found out a little bit. And so teams are having to find new ways to do it. You know, there are teams who have been successful in the Premier League who are still far more direct. There are some teams who rely much more on getting crosses into the box. But as you say, all styles will get found out. But the best coaches will realize when it's getting found out and change their style and make it work. So they're always being chased. Any coach that plays the same way for too long, everyone will catch up. And then they've been doing it so long, they can't change the style. But I think it's about how brave are you, because you've got to be brave enough not to just follow something blindly. Every team, every fan wants to see possession football. One touch fine. We all want to see that. If Arsenal started smashing the ball long, I'd be thinking, I don't really want to see this, but we all want to see it. But also, you want to see your team, win as well. And so coaches, I think, have to be brave enough to think, I'm going to change the style and risk it. Like, recently, when I was growing up, it was always 2 strikers until people started playing 1 striker. Now everyone plays 1 striker, really. I would sometimes like to see what would happen if somebody played a good old-fashioned 4-4-2.
Yep.
Where there's 2 strikers, because normally centre halves now, they've got it a little bit easy. There's 1 man to mark. What about if there was 2? I'm sure teams will have forgotten how to defend against that.
The old little and large combination.
Exactly. Big player, little player. It might, for a while, we might go back to that, because if that, that could almost go ahead again. And then suddenly everyone will start doing that. So I think the great coaches think ahead and change their style.
And then just as a sort of final general football point before we go on to your book and viewers' questions.
Yeah.
I had this debate with a viewer, I think it was yesterday. I feel that this is the weakest Man City side in a long time if you take away Erling Haaland. Would you agree with that?
It's a good question. I'm not sure if their defense is as good as the rest of their team. Let's put it that way. When you look at the personnel, I don't think the back 4 are as strong as the midfield, are as strong as the front line. I don't think so. But the thing is, how often the Man City really have to defend without the ball? Not much. So those defenders, probably most of their job is still in possession. They're very rarely on the back foot because they dominate by having possession. But I think it might be interesting when you have someone as good as Haaland. I do think there's an element where, although he's going to score a ridiculous amount of goals, somewhere along the line, I think it does harm the team.
Yeah.
In the same way that when Man United signed Ronaldo back, he wasn't at his best. He's not in Haaland's level at the moment. But I think it harmed Sancho. I think it harmed Rashford. I think it harmed Fernandes. I think it harmed Pogba. The problem for Man City is, I think you're right. I think they might be slightly weaker, but they will get away with it because Haaland is always going to be there. But if Haaland's there 1 or 2 years, they have to be careful that they don't get lazy and just assume it. Because when he's not there, I think you're right. I think there could be a slight drop off. Because I think last year they did drop off a little bit. And Jesus is a very, very good player. He got just enough goals to get him over the line. But I don't think the team last year was quite as good as a couple of seasons before, when Aguero was leading the line and David Silva was there, maybe, and company was there. Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe a tiny bit. They might smash the Premier League this year. They probably will because they've got Haaland. But is there a lot? Exactly. I think that possibly. You could be right.
I mean, I don't know if you saw that statistic about how long it took him to reach the same amount of hat-tricks as somebody else. And it's ridiculous, like 48 games compared to whatever.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know how teams are going to stop. I don't.
From a coach's perspective, how would you defend against Haaland, or ask your team to defend against Haaland?
I think the biggest thing is if Haaland gets in front of the defender, if he's in front and facing goal, it's game over. Because he has this way, he will block people out, he will get his back in, and people just seem to bounce off him. So I think if you get too tight to him and he spins in behind and Man City play him in, I don't think you can stop him. I think probably you have to try and give him a little bit of space, because his link-up plays are very good. He's a fantastic player. I think if you're tight, he will hold players, he will spin them, he will out-muscle them. And if he's on the wrong side, there's nothing you can do to stop. So I would probably try and give him a couple of yards, let him turn and face with the ball. because I don't think he's quite as effective there as when he's on the other side. So perhaps a little bit of space, but I still don't think that's going to do much good.
Okay.
Sadly.
Yeah. And then just to sort of shift away from that for a minute, I know you want to talk about your book, so should we have a discussion about that?
Yeah, sure, Damien, yeah.
So you published a book, I believe it's called The Soccer Coach's Toolkit.
That's right. Yeah, I did.
Would you care to tell the viewers a little bit about it and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I've got well, obviously, I was going to say handily enough, but I got this here earlier. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
But it's there. It's the Soccer Coach's Toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing this, it was 8 years ago now. And it was published last February by Mayor and Mayor Sport, who are very big sports publishers. So I was very lucky that they took an interest in the book. And it was basically, like any coach, I had boxes and boxes of session plans, pieces of paper, post-it notes. And I had this thing where I couldn't remember. I would go to a session and I'd think, oh, I want to do that shooting drill today. I want to do that passing drill. And I could never find the piece of paper. So I'd write it out again. And eventually I had 5 or 6 duplicates all over the house. And it got to a point where I was going mad. So I thought, I've got to streamline this. So I would find it, I would type it up, I would structure it, and I'd throw the piece of paper away. So eventually I had all the paper gone. And suddenly I looked at it and thought, my goodness, I've got hundreds and hundreds of my own activities here. And my brother said, Rob, why don't you just turn it into a book? And I was a bit lazy. I thought, I can't be bothered. And then gradually, I just started structuring it. I started separating, well, these are the passing activities, these are the shooting, these are the tactical ones, these are the fitness ones. And I'd done about half of the book and I sent it off to publishers and they came back and said, Rob, this is exactly what we want this year. And they basically gave me a deadline to complete the book. And it was published last February. So I don't know how well it's doing. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from coaches and professional clubs and people all over the world. But it's a little bit nerve-wracking because I don't know how many people have bought it. It could just be my mum who's bought it for all I know. Yeah. I hope not. But yeah, no, it was basically, it became a real labor of love. It was 7 years. And the deeper into it you get, the more precise you have to be. Because, you know, when you're a coach, you have an idea in your head. And sometimes when I'm coaching, I explain something and the players look at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. When you're writing it, it's even more nerve-wracking because you get people to read it and they look at it and think, I don't understand that, Rob. So much work went into it and I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Would you say it's simplistic enough for even sort of players that just want to improve basically to have a look at it? Or would you say it's more for a specialized audience?
It's for coaches. So, I mean, it's group activities. So coaches at grassroots, academy level, non-league level, professional level, you can go into the book. And if, for example, you're doing a session on dribbling, a session on volleys, finishing, you can go to that section, excuse me, and there'll be about 20 activities. 7 or 8 of them are basic, 5 or 6 intermediate, 5 or 6 advanced. So let's say you're working with a really good group of players, you'd go to shooting, and there's a whole host of shooting activities to do at an appropriate level. So if a coach wanted a lifetime of activities, whatever level they're at, they will find it in this book. I've covered every technique: running with the ball, volleys, half volleys, heading, receiving the ball, turning with the ball. And there's also a tactical session. So if you're working at a higher level, there's a section on how do we coach pressing? How do we coach defending in wide areas? How do we coach attacking in central areas? So there's something for absolutely every coach. Players can use it, but it's a coach's book. It's it's basically everything I've ever taught, everything I've ever coached in one book.
On the subject of you coaching once again and linking in with the book, are there any specific coaches that inspired you in the way you do things?
Yeah, there are. I mean, you know, I like I like anyone. I like attractive football. I like watching the modern game. I do. Sometimes it's perhaps a little bit too laborious in possession, but I do like to see it. And I think, you know, it's a very obvious thing. I think in his latter years at Arsenal, I think Wenger declined a lot and Arsenal declined a lot for a long period of time. I think the first 8 or 10 years of Wenger, his style of football was incredible because it was possession based, but it was also direct. Arsenal at their best, you know, with Pires, Henry, Bergkamp, they would cut through teams in 3 or 4 passes, not just smash it long, but it was so fast and it was always moving forwards. So I like coaches who keep the ball moving forwards, not just hit it into a channel, but sideways is okay. But I like the coaches who can play forwards. And for a while, I think Wenger was a master at that, always playing forwards. But I also like football to be fun. And if there was one manager I would have liked to play for, it would have been Kevin Keegan. He just comes from that background of, I can imagine he made football fun. I can imagine he made you feel 10 feet tall. And although maybe he might have just kept it simple, but I can imagine if you played for Kevin Keegan, you would run through a brick wall for him. And I like that. I don't think he ever took it too seriously. He was a great player and a good manager, but I don't think he would have bombarded his players with too much tactical information. So yeah, I liked Wenger. I liked Keegan. In the modern game, I think your ex-manager, Potter, outstanding, really outstanding.
Great coach, yeah.
Great coach, yeah, really great coach. Very, very popular.
Being as you've just brought Graham up, I'm going to ask you this as a sort of football fan myself. What's your opinion on Roberto Deservey?
I don't know a great deal about him. I saw some of the game against Liverpool. But I mean, I guess at this stage, it's still Potter's team, isn't it? You know, it's Potter's players, it's Potter's philosophy. How he's tinkered with that, you could answer that much better than I could. He came from Italy, didn't he?
Originally, yeah, he was recently coach of Shakhtar, but he's worked with Sassuolo and other Italian teams along the way, yeah.
Now, I know Sassuolo are quite a small club, but in recent years, they've done very well. So I'm guessing he was something to do with that.
I'm guessing so. I don't know enough to...
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, David, I don't know a great deal about him. He's got a good hairstyle. You know, he certainly looks the part. He looks like a modern day manager. I know he's very highly thought of in coaching circles, but what I could tell you about how he plays, I couldn't really, but he's got a great platform at Brighton to build up. But I don't know if the expectations might be too much, because I think Potter took Brighton to a place which is, this is no disrespect to Brighton, because Brighton is a very, very good club. Very good club. But I think he took them to, no one wants to play Brighton. And that is incredible from where they were, 15, 20. No one.
Teams like Brighton, as they say, yeah.
Well, you said it, not me.
I mean, I had Liverpool fans saying it to me when we were leaving, so.
Yeah, no, I'm dreading when Arsenal play Brighton. So, you know.
I'm dreading when we play you, to be fair.
Okay, well, that gives me a little bit more confidence.
But obviously, just going back to your book for a second, have you got a personal favourite drill within your book?
Yeah, I have, actually. And it's very, very simple. And I use it a lot. It doesn't require a great deal of coaching. It doesn't require a great deal of tactical input. It's very simple. You can do it for 3v3, 4v4, probably up to about 8v8. And what you do is you'll mark out, obviously, a pitch according to the amount of players. So it'll be a smaller pitch. And typically, you will use a smaller goal. If you're going to use a goalkeeper, then I wouldn't use a full-size goal. I'd reduce the size goal. But you can play this game without goalkeepers. Let's say it's 4v4, no goalkeepers, but it must be a first-time finish. And the game is called Empty the Net. Each team puts 3 balls in their goal. The coach rolls on ball into the middle. So there's 1 ball in play. Both teams are defending a goal. There's 3 balls in each goal. If you score, ball goes into their goal. The nearest defender runs to his goal, gets the ball out. you play with that goal. The whole idea of the game is if you get all of the balls in their goal, you win. If they get all the balls in your goal, they win. And kids in particular love it. It can go on for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and it's non-stop. It's relentless. And it's such a refreshing way to coach matches. All kids and players love matches, but this one is a real challenge. It is so hard to get enough goals consecutively to win the game. It's a great game. Empty the net. 3 balls either end, 1 ball in play. Who can clear their goal the first? Really great game.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, we want to talk about your book a little bit more. So, have you got any specific places where my viewers can buy the book if they're interested?
Yeah, I mean, it's on sale on all good bookshops. So Waterstones, for the British audience, Waterstones, WH Smith's, it's on sale, Amazon in the UK and in the US. If there are any American viewers out there, they will know Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble's a big bookshop out there. It's on sale all over the world, I believe. It's a German publishers, so it's published in German, it's in English, it's being translated into Spanish, and potentially, fingers crossed, Japanese. So that opens up the South American market and the Spanish market, and for the Japanese, obviously, Japan. But basically, if you go to Google and you type in the Soccer Coaches Toolkit, it will take you to hundreds of bookstores where you can buy it. So the good old-fashioned Google search, the Soccer Coaches Toolkit will come on, and you can probably find the cheapest copy if you fish around at different online bookstores.
I mean, if you can provide me with a link, I will also pop that in the description to help my viewers
That
get
would
to
be
it
brilliant.
easy.
I will do, yeah.
And also, just to sort of wrap it up, because I think I've taken up enough of your time,
Been a
I've
pleasure,
got a few viewer questions, if that's okay.
Yep.
So my viewers would like you to name your all-time greatest five-a-side team that you could put together.
Oh. So this involves players from the past as well.
Yep, you can pick any player you want.
Okay. Well, I think goalkeeper would be Peter Schmeichel.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see how you could score. You know, when he used to come out and do the old, spread eagle, I just can't imagine. And he's also so terrifying. I think anyone who goes near the penalty area, you probably just shout at them.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably run a mile. So Schmeichel in goal. I think all of the players, they have to be ball players. So, you're not going to get, no disrespect, you're not going to have Martin Keough, maybe, at the back. You can have someone a little bit more sophisticated. So I'm going to go for Paolo Maldini.
One of the greatest of all time.
One of the greats, because he can play off both feet as well. So he can play right, he can play left. So I'd have Maldini at the back on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're looking at two midfielders and 1 striker. So the 2 midfielders, I'm going to go for Maradona.
Mm-hmm.
Maradona on the left, I would say. You're not going to get the ball off him. And I'm going to put him in there with an absolute animal. So I'm going to put him in with Patrick Vieira.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just think Patrick Vieira's legs are so long, they'll probably cover the whole five-a-side pitch. You wouldn't get past him, and he could let Maradona run riot. Up front, I think it would have to be Ronaldo, not Cristiano.
The proper Ronaldo, our generation's Ronaldo.
Yeah, I think just trying to imagine marking him in 5-a-side. I think most people would give up after about 10 seconds.
I'd give up. I'd be like, yeah, I'm done. Bye.
Yeah, no, so I wouldn't get out of the car. So yeah, Schmeichel, Maldini, Vieira, Maradona, Ronaldo. I'm quite happy with that.
And then a little extension on that from myself. What manager would you put in charge of that team?
Who would be a great 5-a-side manager? I'm going to say this to please you, Damien. Mm-hmm. Graham Potter.
Out of all the coaches ever, you'd pick Graham.
Of the current day ones, I think he'd do a great job with a 5-a-side team.
I mean, I agree with you. The ball control would be unbelievable.
Yeah, I always remember Guardiola said something about Brighton under Potter, and it always struck me, and I say it to players now. He said about them, every touch makes sense. And it really struck me, which is, it's not just the pass. The touch leading to the pass needs to make sense. If the touch is wrong, the pass is wrong. If the pass is wrong, the next touch is wrong. Yeah. And I think that in the five-a-side, that is critical. That every touch is spot on. So yeah, of the modern day managers, why not? Why not? Let's have Potter in there.
And then just one final viewer question for you, and I'm also interested in this myself. What are your thoughts on VAR?
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Yeah, I'm not a fan, Damien. What about you? Are you a fan? Or?
I said that I'm a fan if it's used properly, like it was at World Cups and stuff, for example, where the referee sent straight to the monitor straight away. Yeah. Not all this long 5-minute delay that ruins the flow of the game, gets in the player's head psychologically. Yeah. I mean, I remember one game at the Amex, I forget who it was against. We found ourselves doing that slow clap like they do at Wimbledon because we all got bored.
Yeah. It can go on so long.
That has no place in football at the top level.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And I mean, there's two reasons I don't like it. One is where the need for it came from. Now, obviously, the stakes are high, and so we need correct decisions. I understand that. You know, for example, I remember Lampard's goal at the Euros years ago against Germany, which was that much over the line. Yeah. You know, but that was kind of a pretty weird one. I've always thought the referees on the whole, people can always slag the referees off. I think it's an incredibly hard job, and I think to get to the top level, most refs make very good calls. But I understand why for things like the ball going over the line, we need it. I understand that. But what I don't like is the people who criticize VAR now, the managers, the pundits who say, oh, this hasn't worked. It was that mentality of always moaning at the ref, intimidating the ref, not accepting the ref's decision that made us go down the route, because people wouldn't accept the ref's decision. So we had to have a second view, a third view, down to the minute detail. And what I don't like is it sets a precedent in life, which is if you don't like something, you can moan and disrespect people in authority, and then they'll change it. And now that they've changed it, people are still moaning about it. So if we had just listened to the referees and accepted that 99% of the time, I think they make the correct call. Will they get everything right? No. But I don't like where it came from. And also what I don't like, Dave, what you're saying is I don't celebrate goals anymore. You know that thing when your team scores? Yeah. I sit there now and I'm like, did the ball go out of play? Did he push someone in the build-up?
Was he offside by about that much? Yeah.
It's horrible. And then by the time they've okayed it, the moment's gone. So you don't go crazy with your friends anymore. You sit there thinking, we scored, but have we scored? And then they confirm the goal and you're like, oh, well done, we scored. You know, I mean,
it's like with the goals this weekend. I was literally waiting for Liverpool to kick off again until I knew, yes, your team have scored. And I didn't like it at all.
Not at all. It takes the joy out of football. And that's the best thing about being a football fan is celebrating your team's goals. If we can't celebrate goals,
what's the point in the game?
It becomes joyless.
I mean, just to touch on this with you, because I've asked other people, but I've never had a coach that I could ask. I said that maybe a slight solution to this would be if the refs were mic'd up like they are in rugby and you could hear the decision-making process. That would make the fans respect the referee a lot more and there wouldn't be a need for VAR.
I think so. I think it might help, but I'm still not sure when football's such a passionate, emotive game. Even if the decision is correct and you can hear the referee saying it, will the fans in the heat of the moment and the players in the heat of the moment, will they accept the pictures? Maybe not. Will they accept the words? Maybe not. That's what football can do to people. People can go so crazy and so over the top. You can see it and fans will still be like, no, he's not offside. And it's like, well, he is. And then the ref might be saying, well, this player was offside at this moment. They'll still be saying, no, he wasn't. You know, that's just your opinion. So it's almost getting to the point where the referees have to show it. They have to say it. What's next? You know, write it down on a whiteboard for people. I understand what you're saying, but I still think it could all be stopped.
How would you make those stop then? Do you have any idea?
I don't think you can, Damien, because it's not that I don't want to, but I just think it's so much part of what society is like now, which is people are, or not, this is a massive generalization, people are more out for personal gain. People are more out for themselves. People have less respect for authority. And I think it all ties into that, which is you don't like something, you moan and moan and moan, and then somebody gives in and gives you what you want. And I think kids are learning that. And by the time they're playing football, I think they know if they give the referee a hard time at grassroots level, what's to stop the referee thinking, I've got the dad shouting at me, I've got the mum shouting at me, I've got the player shouting at me, I'll just change my decision because I just want my 50 quid and go home. And by the time they get to a higher level, they've learned that. So unless the governing bodies are totally serious about stamping it out, totally serious, not paying lip service to it, you know, you address the referee as sir or madam. You say one thing, you're off until you learn that you don't question a referee's decision. Unless you're taking that hardline approach, I don't think you can stamp it out.
I mean, as you say, it's about the heat of the moment. I mean, I don't know if you're aware from speaking to Gareth, but I used to play power chair football myself.
Yeah, he told me about it.
And I only ever got booked once in my career. It wasn't for the penalty I gave away. It was the fact I turned around to the ref and went, "Oh, well done."
Yeah. No, we've all done it. We were sadly, you know, we do stupid things, you know, and when you go away, you think, bloody hell, how would I have felt if I was a referee, you know? But yeah, we do it. But if there were strong deterrents, like anything, if you condition someone enough, if you from an early age, red card for 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, they'd be shocked for a while, but then you would learn, like anything, you would learn
discipline.
And if you're not serious about discipline, don't pay lip service to it because you're just wasting everyone's time, you know.
I mean, me having to pay a tenner done meeting, I wasn't going to do that again.
Well, exactly. Yeah, no, that's enough of a deterrent for me as well. That's a few pints. That, do you know what I mean? So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, not a few down here or in London. Probably about 1 or 2.
No, yeah, about 1.5.
Yeah.
1.5. Yeah.
Well, it's been amazing talking to you, Rob. Have you got any final messages you'd like to give the viewers, or?
No, only other than, you know, first of all, buy yourself a copy of the book. You won't regret it. And secondly, I hope that more and more people come on the show because I think you've got a really nice interview style and you've got a lot of football knowledge. So I hope anyone watching this, anyone that's potentially wanting to come on the show, come on the show. Anyone that wants to subscribe or support what you're doing, I'll take my hat off to you. You know, I know you put in a lot of work and research. So get behind Damien. That's what I say.
Thank you, Rob.
Absolute pleasure.